Oh, would you look at that? Another one of those electric scooter companies has gone bankrupt.
It's gone. It's all gone.
Yes, Bird Global has recently gone bankrupt. And it's like, yay! Now we won't have to deal with seeing those scooters cluttering up the streets and not worrying about having to have them run into us and have an inexperienced rider like hurt us on the streets. Wouldn't that be great? We won't have to see them in trash cans or in different bodies of water. Wow, won't that be great? But here's the thing. With these companies going bankrupt, is that actually a good thing? The point of this video is to analyze what the original purpose of these companies was, and is there actually a way to have these companies exist and be a net benefit for society and be profitable? That's what I'm going to answer today in this video. Hi, my name is Billy. This is Business Critiques. I have a lot of ideas, and here are a few of them. All right, now we will start out this video with a little bit of a history on these sorts of companies, these e-scooter ride-sharing companies. Now, there's no doubt if you've lived in a major city or visited one in the past several years, you have seen one of these on the sidewalks, just around places. You've seen one of these, you've seen a bike, you've probably seen them knocked over and abused and in various states of disarray. There are all kinds of companies in this space. So we have Lime, we have Spin, I think they might be bankrupt. Bird just went bankrupt. We've seen other ones, Skip, Wind, all these kinds of things. Now, there was an original purpose for these types of companies, and that was actually to fix a big societal problem that we have. They were trying to fix the problem of there being too much car traffic, especially in cities. They were trying to create a way to compete with cars in a low-cost and friendly or environmentally friendly way. Like, see here, they were trying to use up less space, fit more people on the road. It's honestly a pretty good goal when they started out with. So you got to give them props for that. Now, as we're going to go into this video, what we're going to analyze here is what was wrong. How did they do this wrong? How did they mess this up? You know, all these companies are going bankrupt. I think the only one that's still kind of semi-profitable is Lime Scooter, but they've been losing money for years and they're like barely making a profit. It just doesn't seem to be a good business model. So what we're going to do here, I just have the financials up for Bird Scooter. Right before they went bankrupt, they had some financials. And so as you can see here, you can see total revenue and the cost to have all that revenue. It's pretty much exactly the same. Now, if you know anything about company financials, this is like a horrible number, all right? You do not want the amount of money that you're making to be literally the cost of how you're making all your money. So as you can see here, Bird Scooter literally never made a profit. They never even became close. Like sometimes with a good startup, such as Uber over here, you'll see that these companies will be losing a lot of money over time, but the amount of money they're losing every year will be going down over time until eventually they're maybe making a profit. So this number is in thousands. So Uber is kind of a similar company to look at in this space to compare. And as we can see here with Bird, it was just losing money. Everybody was like, oh, look, maybe they'll get a little bit more profitable. Nope. And then they lost more money and they lost more money. And then they went bankrupt. Now, I think there are three potential big issues with these companies that made them unprofitable and made them go bankrupt. So that's what we're going to be analyzing first. And I think these issues are reliability, convenience, and availability. So first off, the reliability of these scooters. These scooters, originally the business model for these companies was to buy a bunch of cheap e-scooters off of Chinese websites and from Chinese manufacturers, and then just throw them out in the middle of a city into the elements, and then hopefully they get rented out over time. And then what they would do is they would pay people, contractors, to go around town at night picking up these scooters for like $5 to $10, maybe $15 each, to take these scooters home, charge them at their house, and then put them back on the streets in the morning. What they didn't take into account was that a lot of these scooters were built very, very shoddy. They started breaking immediately. There were a lot of news stories coming out about how some of these scooters weren't even lasting a month out in the wild. This was A lot due to maybe environmental factors, just leaving your scooter out in the elements isn't a good idea, but also people. Yes, as we can see here. I don't think that scooter got in there naturally. I think a person did that. And you saw a lot of this, people abusing these scooters. A lot of social media stuff was coming out about that, people just running on them and then breaking them and running away. Didn't work very well. So main issue right there. The companies, I believe I've seen things where they said that these scooters would have taken about at minimum 6 months and probably more like a year to actually break even. And so if they're only lasting a month and sometimes only a few months, you're just basically burning cash. So that's the first issue. Second issue, I think is the big issue, is convenience. Now, I don't know about you specifically, but when I was first trying to download the Bird app, I ran into a few issues. The first of which is that I was out in the wild when I was trying to use this app and download it. And I didn't realize I didn't have any data, cellular data, that I could use to download the app. And I think a lot of people have actually ran into that issue before. And I remember at the time, I was like, okay, I got to download, I got to switch it up so I can have cellular data now and download the app. And then I realized, oh wait, I got to make an account now. And then, oh wait, now I have to add a credit card to this, and then I have to scan the barcode. And there's just a lot of steps to start out with this app. And I think a lot of people saw that too, and they just didn't really like it and didn't really gel with it. Another thing, and this kind of goes into convenience, but this is a big issue here. I think the pricing model of these companies is just not conducive to creating an enjoyable experience, if you know what I mean. The pricing model is, it's like $1 to unlock, and then 15 to 40 cents per every minute that you have the scooter unlocked. Now, personally, when I'm using something for the first time, I like to feel like I'm enjoying it. I like to feel like I can just, oh yeah, I have an hour to just mess around with this thing and see what it can do and have fun. But if I know I'm being charged by the minute to use something, it just creates a little bit of anxiety in my mind. I feel it does that with a lot of people, other people as well. And instead, what happens if you're using a scooter, what you're doing is you're just racing to try to go somewhere in town. Then you're trying to get off the scooter as quickly as possible because you know you're being charged by the minute. And I don't like this pricing model at all. Like, for instance, if you're using your car, most people have a detachment from how much it costs to actually own a car versus what it actually costs. So most people, we don't know how much it costs per minute to drive our car. At most, some people might know how much per week they spend on their car, because you have all your different licensing fees, which in our own heads, we don't really take those into account. But then once a week or whenever we need to fill up on gas, we're spending $40, $50, $60. Sometimes you have a car payment per month, but it's very like disembodied, if you know what I mean. And so that was a big issue as well. And finally, availability. This actually was probably the biggest issue I think they had with their model by far. These scooters are not convenient to use for somebody's daily commute. You cannot reasonably use these things if you're trying to go run errands and go to the store, or really just use them for purposes that you would use a car for in town. For instance, let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to use one of these scooters to go to Whole Foods. I'm going to pick up some groceries. Well, first off, you have no idea where these scooters are going to be at any given time. They could be right in front of your house, really convenient, or if somebody's taken it somewhere, you have no idea where the closest scooter is. And so you have to find one on the app, you have to walk to it or drive to it, I don't know. And then you have to unlock it, you have to go, and then you park at your grocery store. You finally get to the grocery store with this scooter, and then you have to park it somewhere. And then you run your errands and you come back out and you're just like, wait, oh, somebody took my scooter. You have no way of like saving your scooter just for you while you're inside a store running errands. That is ridiculous. There should be a way that somebody can use the app and reserve their scooter for like an extended period of time. Because if you drive your scooter somewhere, go inside a store, and then come back out and your scooter's not there, well, then you're stranded. And that's not cool. And we can't create some sort of system where people are actually using microtransit to get around, where it's unreliable and you don't know where these scooters are going to be in town and at what times you can find them at different places. It just needs to be more reliable in terms of where we're going to find these things and the convenience of them. Like, for instance, what we can do is we can compare it to a city bus or a city train. If the buses don't arrive on time at consistent times, people don't use city transit. This is a pretty well-established thing. I think we all kind of intuitively understand it. That's why in a lot of major cities in the US, people don't use city transit very much, because usually it's unreliable. The times when you can use it are just not great or convenient. All right, that brings us on to the proposed solutions aspect of this video. We're gonna go through, I think I have around 7 to 8 ideas that could help make these companies profitable. And so let's get into that. All right, number 1, I think it's pretty obvious actually. These companies need charging station networks. Now, what do I mean by that? They need places in town, all throughout towns. I'm talking at major areas, like we need areas at grocery stores, apartment complexes, malls, other places where people hang out and congregate. We need charging networks where these scooters are parked in and they are charging at these stations. Now, what we can do is there's already several companies that make these sorts of things. And the slight twist that I want to do with these is that I want them to be treated almost like a Tesla charger network or like the Amazon lockers. So if you've ever seen Amazon lockers, usually if you've been to university, or sometimes they're in big garages at apartment complexes, you'll see these in a lot of kind of private business areas as well. And what I've realized is that businesses actually sometimes reach out to Amazon to put an Amazon locker in their store or near their store because they want the foot traffic that these Amazon lockers generate. And I was like, oh, that's kind of brilliant. Instead of trying to create a charging network using public land, where you're trying to put them in parks and stuff like that, you can still try to do that, but the main focus should actually be trying to put charging networks around private businesses, because the people that run those businesses are going to want foot traffic, and they're going to want people coming up to these charging networks and picking up a scooter and then taking it somewhere else, but then they look at the business and they patronize the business a bit. So, for instance, who's a prime candidate that the demographic that shops at a store like this would appreciate this kind of thing? Whole Foods, 100%. Maybe Starbucks as well. Can you foresee with me Whole Foods putting a bunch of these scooter charging networks outside all of their stores, and then people can bring their scooters to the store, dock them at the station, and then when they're leaving the store, they're picking up another scooter and going home? This is kind of how you do it. Because then what you don't have to do is you don't have to be paying people to run around the city at night, picking up these scooters, taking them home, and charging them at their home. Now you can just get rid of that expense entirely. Now what happens is that people bring their scooters to the charging stations, they pick them up from the charging stations, and they're 100% charged all the time, and they can just use them as much as they want, and we just removed a huge expense right here. Now, with these businesses, I'm sure Whole Foods, you can read this. I'm sure Whole Foods could potentially cut a deal with these electric scooter companies where they take a fee of all the rides that happen from their charging stations, something like that, but I'm sure it could be worked out. And for instance, look at this. Companies already make these. There's already several companies that make charging stations for scooters and electric bikes. This is a thing. This could literally be plug and play. So yeah. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, all right, Billy, but how are we going to make people actually bring their scooters back to the charging stations once they're done with them? What kind of system are we going to implement there that'll encourage people to do that? Well, that goes into the second point, micro deposits. Yes. A lot of places, a lot of businesses already have a micro deposit system. Let's say with other industries, like I don't know if you've ever been skiing or if you've ever rented just anything like an electric bike from any other kind of company. They usually have you put down a deposit. Now, I think we don't need like $100, $200 deposits for somebody using these scooters, but we can have a micro deposit of say $5 to $10 per scooter. And what happens is that if somebody brings their scooter to a charging station in town, and we want to make it so that it can be any charging station in town, what happens is that the person gets their micro deposit back and the scooter charges and you're well on your way. But what happens is that if somebody doesn't bring their scooter back to the charging station and they just leave it somewhere, then what can happen is either a contractor or just anyone that sees the scooter on the sidewalk or on the ground, what they can do is they can take the scooter back to a charging station and claim that micro deposit that the other person forfeited. So for instance, here, what I have here, I don't know if you've ever seen this kind of thing before. This is actually a very unique grocery chain called Aldi's. And what they do here is if you want to buy a cart, you have to bring a quarter with you. And the quarter unlocks the shopping cart and then you can use your shopping cart in the store. And if you want your quarter back once you're done at Aldi's shopping, you have to put the shopping cart back in its stall, and that's how you get your quarter back. And I was like, oh, that's such a smart idea. I love micro deposits. Also, if you live in a state that has like bottle return programs, this is very similar to that, just maybe even a little bit smaller. So yeah, I think that's another thing that could work. All right, third idea. I think these companies need card readers at their charging stations. Right now, the only way to rent one of these scooters or bikes or whatever is to download the app, use the app, put your credit card onto the app, and then you scan the barcode, etc. What you should be able to do is have a card reader at one of these stations that somebody can easily swipe, and then it kind of maybe like works a bit like a vending machine. And now what you do is that most card readers actually allow you to have a deposit with someone that's using a credit card. So you could technically have a deposit of like $100, $200 that is returned to the client once they bring the scooter back to a charging station in town. So you could do it that way, and it could just be automatically done behind the scenes. But I think that's a good way to help introduce people to the idea of using these scooters for microtransit, where you don't have to download the app first. You can just have your credit card, go up to one of these stations, swipe it, take a scooter, bring it back to the charging station you got the scooter from or a different one. And then behind the scenes, it calculates the cost, or maybe there was a little display that told you how much the cost might be per half an hour of using the scooter or something like that, that you swiped before you swiped your card. And then, yeah, when you bring your scooter back, behind the scenes, it charges your credit card and you're good to go. All right, solution number 4. We need extra spaces at these charging stations. Now I'm like, okay, is this actually another idea or what is this? No, this is important. This is important. We need lots of extra spaces at these charging stations because what I said earlier about you can take a scooter from one of these charging stations and then return it to a different charging station at a different place in town. That's the important part. That's why you need extra charging spots. Because if people are maybe moving from one side of town to a different side of town, you need extra spots at these stations so that there's room and there's capacity for that kind of demand to be met. So this is just a really simple part. It should be very rare that you have to leave the rental scooter actually on the street because a charging station is 100% full, just so we can always at all times have these scooters charged up, ready to go. But then you might be saying, oh, but how do we ensure that there's always extra spots at these charging stations? I don't know why I'm always so excited about these ideas. What we need to do is we need to take those contractors that were originally taking the scooters at night and charging them at their homes, and they need to have a new job. And that new job is helping meet surge demand for scooters around town. So for instance, let's just say here, there's a huge amount of demand for scooters right over in this area, but there's a ton of scooters over here. So what we can do is we can have somebody that's paid, and it can be, a few dollars, $5, something like that, less than the amount it costs to charge overnight, but enough to make it worth people's while. And so people can go around the city picking up scooters in one area and moving them to areas where there's a big surge of demand, so that there's always availability of scooters at every charging station in town, and there's also a lot of empty spots available. So for instance, that's already kind of what happens. You already see with Lime scooters, these contractors that drive around in minivans, and they pick up the scooters, they charge them at home, they put them back on the street, but these guys should actually just be working during the day, moving these scooters around town and putting them in different places to meet demand. And this is actually how you create a way to bring people into this ecosystem of microtransit and electric bikes and scooters, where they're using these things for their daily commutes and for their daily errands that they're running. Because what they can do is they can go outside their apartment in the morning, they go to their nearest Bird station, electric scooter station, and they pick up a scooter from the charging station, they drive it to wherever they need to go, they dock their scooter at a station that's there, maybe like a Whole Foods or somewhere else, and then they go and shop, they come back out, they grab that same scooter or a different one, and they take it back home to the charging station that's closest to their apartment. I think that's how you really help create this sort of microtransit system that can go on, because there's always free spots at all the stations so that you can meet that demand from people just commuting back and forth between things. All right, and then number 6, at some point, these companies should introduce multiple pricing tiers. What I mean by this is they need to have different kinds of solutions for different kinds of people running different sorts of errands. So for instance, right now, a lot of these places just have scooters. A lot of these companies just use scooters. Sometimes they do e-bikes. But what they should be doing is they should have a wide array of different types of things they're using. So we need e-scooters, then we can have e-bikes, but then we can have cargo e-bikes. And then potentially another idea I had is that maybe we could even have just normal push pedal bikes that aren't electric. And those could be more for people that are either really health conscious and want to actually ride their bike everywhere, or it could be for people that are maybe like lower income and want to have a pricing tier that's really low barrier of entry. So that's an option there. I also think potentially Bird Scooter should change how they price things up. So instead of $1 to open to activate a rental and then 15 to 40 cents per minute that you're on the rental, they should either charge by the half an hour, or they should probably start charging per mile, plus maybe a small charge per minute, like 1 to 2 cents, something like that. I think what this will help do is this will help make people more want to stay with their scooters and just kind of enjoy themselves. So if you're charging by the mile, then if you're just kind of going slowly to your local shop to go somewhere, and maybe you meet somebody along the way and you're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And you start up a conversation, you're not necessarily being charged that much while you're kind of sitting there or while you're going slowly driving somewhere. I think that this would just help a lot with making the user experience better. So maybe we would call that solution the idling feature, something like that. And like I was saying, I think if we had just normal pedal bikes at some of these stations, we could even maybe have some sort of a non-profit element to these businesses, kind of give them that brand image that like companies such as Goodwill have, where you can be like, oh yeah, we're a charity, but we're also a social movement. And what we're doing here is we're trying to get everybody to be using bikes and e-scooters at all times. And so we have pricing tiers for like way high up here for people that want the premium experience, but we want to hit those lower rungs of the ladder too. We want everybody to be using bikes and scooters to get around town. So we have those low priced options for them as well. Feel free to pause here if you want to keep reading about this particular solution. All right, number 7, and I like this one a lot because it's just a silly word I hadn't thought of. Monthly Bird-Scriptions. So what we need is that the big game changer we could have with these companies is that if people pay a monthly subscription fee to have like unlimited rides on our scooters, that could be a game changer right there. Or this could potentially work kind of how like cell phone providers used to work, where you have just a certain number of texts that you can send per, month. Maybe there's a certain number of miles you can ride per month, and then you have to buy additional miles, or you can have unlimited miles. There can be multiple options and different plans for people that want to pay a monthly subscription. There could be different tiers of subscriptions. So for instance, maybe the lowest tier only gets you access to electric scooters. That might be kind of interesting. The second tier, that gets you access to electric bikes. And then the final tier gets you access to everything, as well as cargo electric bikes as well, and maybe some other kind of premium feature. Or you could even just have a tier where somebody just pays per mile that they ride. They walk up, they just want to be paid per mile, no monthly subscription, and that could be fine too. And a big thing that would be really fun to implement, but just dealing with city governments might be an issue, is if you could integrate the monthly subscription into a city bus pass or some kind of city transit pass. That might be really cool, because then you could be partnering with the cities. People could be using the bus to get to a scooter station, and then they take the scooter and go home with it or go to run an errands with it. And that could actually help public transit in the US become bigger because it helps make it more convenient and easy to use. That's just a fun idea. All right, and finally, the last idea. All right, thanks for sticking around so far. The final idea is sell branded scooters that work with the charging network. Actually, I think this is kind of the game changer right here. If you can create this network of charging stations around town, then what you can do is you can sell scooters that work with your charging network. And then you can charge people maybe like a monthly subscription fee to have unlimited charges at your charging network. So then instead of people having to worry about like, oh, I pick up a scooter, I take it to run an errand, and then when I'm coming back, I have to pick a different scooter. Nope, none of that anymore. Now what you can do is you can take your scooter somewhere, you park it at a station, it's yours, nobody else can grab it. It's locked in. And then you come back out of the store, you pick up your scooter, and you drive home. And so then with this model, you're basically becoming kind of like the Tesla of electric scooters in a way, because you're selling people their electric scooters and you're kind of selling them the electricity that they use to charge their scooters with. I think this could be the huge game changer and might actually end up being the most profitable segment of this business if it were to get implemented. So yeah, like I was saying, you could go to the charging stations. Maybe the charging stations would charge like a $1 to $5 fee per charge, or maybe monthly you pay $10 to $30 to have access to the charging network in a town. That might be kind of cool. And instead of people having to bring their own bike locks and stuff around when they run errands, people can put their own scooters into these charging network stations and they just get locked in. They can't be taken out. So then that gives peace of mind for people as well. That's a good service, way to provide value. Yeah, and like I was saying, Bird Scooter should become more of a scooter selling company which offers a Tesla charging network and a safe bike scooter locking station for a monthly fee. And so then this kind of hits all tiers of people. So what you're doing is you're able to just hit the people that are just visiting a city and they just want to use like one or two scooters, rent them once or twice to like get around town. But then it also hits your daily commuter, somebody that's living in these cities and wants to get around, run errands, do all their stuff, and they don't want to own a car to be able to do it. And yeah, I was thinking even with this business model, potentially selling these scooters could start out as a loss leader at first, because maybe you could be selling these scooters for super cheap, below cost, but you know that you'll make money on the back end from these people charging their scooters at your network, at your charging stations, and having that monthly fee that just goes every month. Yeah, and then it allows you to potentially sell different types of scooters. So some people might want just tiny scooters that they can just flip out, or maybe they can easily bring on a bus or put in a car. But some people might want really sturdy scooters that have really long range. And so you can sell that broad range of scooters to people. but you have to make sure that they all still fit in the charging network or at the charging stations. And all right, I did some more stuff. I looked at some financials. Here's the thing. Uber made $36 billion in revenue last year. The entire ride-sharing market is estimated to get to $47 billion this year, and it's growing at about 10 to 12% per year. That's pretty good. The electric scooter and bike market is $26 billion in 2023 and expected to grow at about 10% per year. Here's my thing. This microtransit company can take over probably like 1/4 of all of the ride-sharing transit that's happening. So it can take maybe 1/4 of Uber's business and kind of get into that electric and bike scooter selling market. I think we could be looking at least 20 to 30 billion in yearly revenue by 2029. So I just took those numbers, divided up by a fourth, added that 10% per year that things grow by. And then you're adding in the monthly subscription fees that people would be paying to charge on your network, talking about sales of e-bikes and scooters. Honestly, it's probably not hard to imagine a profit margin in the range of 10 to 20%. Now, I think if you've seen with other companies like Tesla, their margins are about 10 to 20% right now. Uber is starting to finally get out of that hole and start having a good profit margin. But if we're looking at this, if we're looking at similar companies, if you can be looking at about 2 to 6 billion in yearly profits on a company that's making about 20 to 30 billion in revenue, I looked it up. The price to earnings ratio of a stock like that is usually between 15 to 20. That's what Apple is usually ranges at. So you're looking at a company that's worth about, this is really rough, but 30 billion at the minimum, probably more like 100 billion at the top. And if you're looking at tech companies in general, Uber is worth 130 billion right now, even though it barely makes any money. So potentially there's even worth there to be over 100 billion in value. And so there's two more little parts to this. I have how we might market these things and how we're going to distribute them. First off, what you got to do with these companies, we need ad campaigns. We need fun ad campaigns. And so I just thought of a few fun little things like fly past traffic in your bird scooter, take flight on my e-bike. And what you do right there is you have a fun little advertising campaign where you have somebody that's just all stressed out in their car. They're just like, oh, I hate traffic. And then they see somebody, so maybe some older gentleman that looks nice. He's like, he rides by on his e-scooter or his e-bike. You see all these other people doing it. The people in the cars are all like, what? People can do this? And they're like, what? And the people on the e-bikes are just like, yeah, we're cool. Something like that. It'd be kind of silly. And then maybe you show how many people can fit on a road that's just using e-bikes and e-scooters versus how many cars can fit on that same road, just to show that you can fit much more people on a road if it's using e-bikes and e-scooters. That'd be kind of fun. And then finally, how we're going to implement this. What you got to do, distribution. Distribution, how we start out this company. We need to start out in the major cities. Most fun US cities. You got to start in one city, get a few cities and expand from there. So probably San Francisco, of course. Everybody's got to do San Francisco. Maybe LA, maybe Portland, Seattle, those kind of cities. And then what you do there, you're trying to collect data on what works. Which of these solutions that are proposed maybe works. But then eventually what you're doing is you're trying to actually probably get bought out by a bigger company. So if we're really thinking here, you could try to go the path of just being your own thing and trying to be your own independent company for as long as you can. But what might end up happening in the future is that if you can create a profitable business model, other companies are going to want to buy you out. Probably Uber would end up buying out a company like this, probably when it gets to the size of $1 billion, but it might take a while. So maybe if this company got to like a $10 billion valuation, it might get bought out by Uber or some other company that wants to get into the ride-sharing business with e-scooters. Honestly, that might help this business a lot because having e-scooter rentals added in as a feature on every Uber app on people's phones, that's a lot of extra customers. And so honestly, if this company really wants to become a thing, probably being bought out by Uber or Lyft or partnering with them in some way is really the way to go in the long term, just to get in front of as many people as possible. And so, yeah, we call this a high effort video. I love making these sorts of videos. Thank you if you stuck to the end here. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you want more videos like this, more breakdowns of companies. I'm going to be trying to share this video out to Lime Scooter and different other companies to see if I can get somebody to like implement one of the ideas in this video. But I really appreciate it if you know somebody in that industry, if you could share this video with them. But other than that, if you want to that's all I'm asking. Like this video, subscribe, appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out.